the last chapter. Okay, so guys, I hope the screen is visible.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so guys, we'll try to the target for today is to finish up at least the half portion of this chapter. Okay, so not the entire could be done. So whatever we could finish it off today would be good. Okay, so guys, I'll just brief you about this chapter first and then start looking into certain text. So guys, what I have done, we will not read the entire text. I have created small uh, you can say summary points on every page. Okay, so what they are conveying, so you'll try to cover up those, and in between certain paragraphs which are important. Okay, so the initial section has been done like that, and then we talk about discrimination theories that we will do from certain notes that I have created. Okay, so guys, this chapter, as the name says, gender, race, and ethnicity in the labor market. So guys, basically these are the three ways in which there could be a discrimination in any labor market. Okay, basically because of your gender, because of the race that you belong to, or because of certain ethnicity, or you can say indigenous or ethnic group that you belong to, there could be a discrimination in the labor market. Okay, so guys, basically this chapter is looking into American labor force. Okay, so largely examples and the data is quoted from that American labor market. So guys, it says particularly that American labor force participation has changed dramatically over the last few decades, you can say, and particularly relating to these three parameters. First is your women participation in the labor force vis-a-vis household work and workforce. Okay, so how the proportion has been changing. So of course we know that there is a larger proportion of women now working rather than engaged in their household work. Okay, second is the labor immigration that is currently happening, and this immigration could be your legal and illegal. Because of that, there is been a larger change in the people who are participating in the labor force market. Okay, a major jump. And then of course there are birth rates which are changing. So basically the people who are belonging to certain ethnic groups who have been staying in America for very long, the change in the birth rates have been happening. So basically their birth rates have been doubling over the years. So as a result, now the proportion of people engaged from these racial ethnic groups have been expanding. Okay, so what are the implications on them? Now the participation of other groups in comparison to white male. So guys, one thing you have to remember in this entire chapter, what is the you can say the base with which we are comparing. So if I want to compare the women participation, or if I want to compare the minorities participation, that is ethnic group, or the people who have been migrating, so to whom we are comparing? We are comparing with a white male. Okay, so white male is a one who gets the you can say very high paying job, you can say white collar jobs, and their pay scales is generally larger. Okay, so we are comparing the discrimination with respect to that base, that is the salaries which white males are receiving. Okay, so guys, these portions have been marked. So what are we looking into? Participation of other group in comparison to white males have definitely been increased. So guys, this table they are quoting, table 12.1. So guys, you can see the participation in terms of different groups. In 1986, white males participation was 45%, women 45, blacks 11, Asians 3, and other groups 7. So you can see 96 and 2006 data. White male participation has reduced to 38, women participation has increased, black participation has increased marginally, similarly for Asians as well, whereas other races have increased to substantial number from 7 to 12%. So there has been increase in terms of people belonging to these three groups which have been changing. Okay, but earnings, if you talk about particularly labor force participation, is something else, like enrollment, the number of people who are part of my current labor force. But what about their earnings? Okay, are they getting the same level of earnings as a white male is receiving or not? Okay, but what we can see through the data that they are saying, that the earnings have not increased except for the Asians. Asians are actually receiving quite a good amount of money, whereas the other groups, particularly black, women, Hispanic, all these peoples have not received that much salary. Okay. So, guys, it says that the growing numerical significance of demographic groups whose numbers are relatively poorly paid has heightened interest. So, guys, the reason we are doing this study or this chapter is that to look into that why there has been a larger gap in terms of earnings among these groups, white male vis-a-vis your women or the minority groups. Okay, so basically they are clubbing this group, what you can say in terms of immigration or the people belonging to different ethnic groups as minorities. Okay, so this chapter is trying to understand what are the sources of earnings of difference across different groups. Okay, so why there is a reason for earnings. So guys, of course you can think of the reason. It could be your productivity, it could be your quality. Apart from that, there could be a certain kind of prejudice which is attached by the people, basically the people who are hiring them against these people. Okay, so that could be one of the reasons. Okay, so guys, in this chapter basically we are trying to focus on, we are analyzing the topics or the reasons for differential earning differential among different groups. Okay, and these earning differentials could be categorized under three categories: gender, race, and ethnicity. Emphasizes is on the definition and problems in the labor market discrimination. Okay, so guys, discrimination, understanding that what are the different types of discrimination. So how do we define that? So guys, basically I'm telling you we are talking into two types of discrimination. One is your wage discrimination, second is your occupational discrimination. Okay, wage discrimination meaning that maybe I have the same level of education, or in terms of I'm working on the same profile as well, but I am being paid less money comparison to someone who belongs to a you can say in comparison to a white male. Okay, irrespective, my job profile is same, but I'm getting the less salary. Then there is an occupational segregation. Because I am a female, I would be receiving a, you can say I would be hired on a different post which will pay me a less salary. Okay, that is occupational segregation. Basically it is related to your human capital characteristics. It is assumed that women might be less productive, so as a result they would be paid less. That would be occupational segregation. So this will come, I'm just briefing it out. So guys, we look into the earning differential, gender, race, emphasizing on the problems that what is labor market discrimination, and then what are the different theories of discrimination. Okay, so that is one of the major part. And the fact is that what could be the policies to combat. Okay, so guys, policies are basically your US government policies to tackle that. So within that, we don't need to focus on all the policies, but there is one comparable worth law. Okay, there is a law called comparable worth law that we will be looking into, that what are the implications of that in order to combat the discrimination. Okay, so guys, again I'm just repeating that how we are looking into, we are finding the reasons for earning differential among these three groups. Why? Because the data availability is there, and and the analysis that why we say that there is a earning differential, we are looking into the earnings received by the various group rather than the compensation that is, because the data on earnings are generally available rather than the data on the compensation that we have. Okay, so guys, with this we looked into the second part, measured and unmeasured sources of earning differences. Guys, if you have anything, please ask. If you have any questions pertaining to what I've said, if there is any question, ask, otherwise we move ahead. Guys, is it clear or is there any doubt? Okay, okay.
Ma'am, what was the earnings compensation bit that you just told?
So earnings is something that you get at the end of the day. Compensation could be, there could be perks, benefit, all the other benefits which are part of. So that becomes a broader concept. For generally, we don't have a data on compensation. So we are just focusing on the at the end of the salary that you receive. Okay, Arushi?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So guys, with this, we go ahead. So now we are talking about these earning differences across gender, race, and ethnicity. Okay, so guys, you would see that generally earning differences by gender, that is male versus women, of course, the gap has been narrowing. Okay, so guys, I'll just show you the figure. So if there is, yeah. So guys, the earning differentials are lot. If you would see earnings as a percentage of white male earnings, so different categories are there. So you can see how much they are getting. So it's almost 66% of what your males are receiving. So which is very less. So but this gap has been actually narrowing. Okay, it was 67%. So it came down to 50. So you can see the gap has been, of course, lessening up, but still there is a considerable gap. So it says that understanding the sources of this difference is critical to determine that what policies we might need to address this gap. Okay, so guys, first of all, to understand why this potential is happening. Okay, so guys, I'm not going into the detail, I just summed up. So I'm just noting down, I note down those points, so we will just discuss those. Okay, so guys, the potential difference what they have quoted is about the level of education. Okay, so guys, it is about prioritizing what they have found, that white males tend to have a larger education. So as a result, that some of the reason that why women are paid less is because of their level of education. And then also with respect to age. So guys, we have learned in your chapter 9 that there is an earning age differential. So what happens that women also tend to leave the labor force at a different ages because of their commitment to work or for raising children. So because of that, their productivity tends to fall, and as a result, there is a difference in their earnings which they receive. Then there is a some factor called occupation. So guys, it is generally assumed that women choose the occupation which provides a less salary as well. Okay, because as we have seen that they go for the jobs which have less training. Okay, because they don't want to invest in those, because they would be knowing that somewhere in between they might take a gap as well. Okay, so they choose an occupation where they are receiving less salaries. And of course, the work time that they spend. So given the time that white male is spending, women are actually spending less time on the work. So as a result, that is also one of the reason for potential difference between their earning. And then of course the experience, that over the years, because of different gaps, they are less experienced. So as a result, because of experience, there could be a reason for difference between the earnings between a female and a white male. Okay, then there's something which they're quoting about, that age earning curve for women is flatter. Okay, so of course we know that for the men, or in general, that we have seen, it becomes steeper because they invest in training, because they are investing in a lot of other in order to enhance their skills. So there's a large gap of the earnings that they receive. It's not, it will keep on rising, but for the women, after a certain point, there's not much larger increase in their earnings, because they are not investing in those training sessions, they are not investing on the in terms of experience that they want to get, so they are not doing that. So as a result, their age earning curve becomes flatter. Okay, but what they have account for, that even after they control for age education, they still find that even if we leave this age earning curve, we still find that there is a substantial difference between the earnings received, and that could be added because of occupational choices they are making, experience that they are doing. That is okay. So female male earning ratio declines with age, but why? So this we will be exploring at the moment. So occupation, women tend to be overrepresented in the low paying and less represented in the high. Even in the high paying occupation, they require higher education, still earning differential due to work time and less experience. Okay. So guys, these are the 5 factors which you have to understand in terms of the potential differences between that why women are paid less. Guys, 1 second. Yes. So, guys, this they are talking about work time, and you can see women typically have less work experience, so are less likely to be promoted. So, could be one of the reasons. So, I have marked this. You can look into that. What important they are talking about, that even after controlling for occupation. So, what I've said, that there were questions that we have marked, that why still there is a gap. So, what they're saying, that clearly controlling for occupation, education, experience, and the hours of work they dedicate to the work, still there are potential reasons why. because when we run a certain regression, there are certain unaccounted, or you can say unexplained error that is there. Okay, so why there is, so it is about, it could be, one is that the remaining differences are the result of characteristics affecting productivity that might differ by gender but cannot be observed. Okay, so basically a factor which is dependent upon the gender would be impacting your productivity, which cannot be explained for. So this could be one of the possible reason why there is a narrowing, but still there is a gap between the wage earnings. Okay, alternatively, or another, the unexplained differential could be interpreted as a result from discriminatory treatment in the labor market. So of course, the first is maybe because of your factors which cannot be explained, that is impacting your productivity because of the gender that you have. Okay, but that cannot be explained. The second one, because of the discriminatory treatment in the labor market. Okay, so you are being discriminated because you belong to a particular gender. Of course, that is one of the reason you might see, but that is narrowing, we don't know. Particularly in America, it's very, very evident. Okay, so guys, this is the part relating to that. Guys, I want to ask you if there's any question, please ask. Otherwise, we move ahead. Okay.
No, ma'am.
Okay. Now, guys, coming to an important part, we are now defining the discriminations. Okay, so what are the different types of discrimination? So, guys, I have told you discrimination is basically could be clubbed, or could be divided into two types. First is your wage discrimination, other is your occupational discrimination. Okay, so guys, of course, I've written this part, but let me read from the text itself. It says that labor market discrimination is said to currently exist if individual workers have identical productive characteristics. Okay, productivity, MPL is same, are treated differently because the demographic groups to which they belong. Okay, there are two prominent forms that gender discrimination is alleged to take. Okay, so guys, but of course, when we are defining this discrimination, whether it's a wage or whether that's an occupational discrimination, at the moment we are talking about discrimination with respect to gender. But these sorts of discrimination also exist with respect to your race and ethnicity as well. Okay, but at the moment we are just talking with respect to the gender discrimination. So what is the first one? Employers are sometimes suspected of paying women less than a man with the same experience and working under the same condition in the same occupation. That is labeled as wage discrimination. So, guys, same profile but different salaries. Second, women with the same education and productive potential as seen as shunted into a lower paying occupation or levels of responsibilities of the by employers who reserve the high paying jobs for men. This latter form of discrimination has been called as the occupational discrimination. So, guys, the second one is basically because you belong to a certain gender, then you would be offered a profile which will give you a less paying salary. Okay, so the first one, same profile, but you are given a less salary. Second one, it is because of a gender, you are given a profile which will give you a less salary. Okay, so please understand this demarcation, wage, and your occupational discrimination. Okay, so guys, it says that labor market discrimination, what are the reasons? Okay, it says that based on the concept of the labor market discrimination is the worker wage are a function. So worker wage are dependent upon two factors. First is the productive characteristics. So how much productive you are in terms of your human capital, size, basically what you are working, so on and so forth, and the price each characteristics commands in the labor market. So how much you can negotiate because of the credentials that you possess. Okay, discrimination is said to be present when the prices paid by employers for a given productive characteristics are systematically different for different demographic groups. Okay, so so if you have the same productive capacity, you are doing the same work, but still you are receiving a different salary because you are belonging to a different demographic group, whether gender, whether it's ethnicity or race, then that is said to be a discrimination. Please understand that. Okay, now the further question, they are saying that why different groups acquire different productive capacities. Okay, so guys, there could be also a reason that there are sometimes productive differences as well. So guys, we will see that when we talk about, you say, when we look into the race, in terms of blacks, okay, so you would see that certain studies have found that they have actually low, in a sense, performed a certain test, IQ test. And what they have observed, that there was a less IQ of blacks when they performed a certain test. So if we are measuring productivity in terms of the marks they score in a particular test, then we say that of course they are less productive. As a result, if they are less productive, definitely they should be receiving the less salary. Of course, there are different reasons why they are not able to get that much score. It could be because of the type of schools they are going. It could be because of the quality that they are receiving in the school. So there could be many reasons. But of course, what I'm trying to say, that if there is a certain kind of productivity difference, then there might be a sense of difference in your salary that would emerge. But if your productive characteristics are same and still you are receiving different salaries, then definitely that is a source of discrimination. Okay, so guys, moving further, I'm not going there, raising certain questions which is talking about that, it could be because of my decisions that I take up. Okay, because it's about gender. So women tend to take certain decisions, that they try to take up certain occupations which are easier, or which will help them to support in their family. So as a result, they are not much, you are not actually spending a larger time or gaining much productivity out of that. So as a result, they choose, these are preconceived, or you can say that these are the decisions which are already taken. Okay, so this does not really talk about segregation as well. It is about the choice women are making to choose such professions which does not provide greater salaries. Okay, so these are certain questions they are saying. So like they have quoted an example of that women don't go for biophysics studying. Okay, why? Because that involves a lot of time or kind of different skills that is required. So why? So they're questioning, which are, you can say, the that has been prior, that has been taken by the woman because of certain consideration. Okay, because of the gender bias. Okay, but whatever, so guys, it says whatever the cause might be, occupational segregation is said to exist when the distribution of occupation within one demographic group is different from the distribution of the other. With respect to the gender, occupational segregation is reflected in there being female dominated occupation and male dominated ones. Okay, so when we reserve certain occupations which are meant for female, or certain occupations which are male dominated, the problem is that occupational segregation is not necessary is not necessarily a reflection of occupational discrimination. Reason being, because people are making choices on their own. They are choosing such occupations which they feel would be best because they belong to a certain gender. So that's why it might not be right to say because it's an occupational discrimination, because employer is not doing that. It is coming from the choices that an individual is making. It's their, they are creating these choices on their own. Okay, so if occupational choices are directly limited, or if they're influenced by the lower payoffs to a given human capital characteristics, then occupational segregation reflects labor market discrimination. Guys, this is very important. So given the same human capital characteristics, education, everything, but because you belong to that gender, you are being offered a job which is actually being, or you can say a profile which gives you a less money. Okay, despite having the same human capital characteristics, that is education, on the job training, skills, so on and so forth, they are exactly the same. But still, you are being offered a position which gives you a less salary, then that reflects occupational segregation or labor market discrimination. So, guys, this thing has to be kept in mind. Okay. So, guys, moving further, I'll just, so guys, it is talking about the difference in preferences that I've talked. So what they are saying about, these are pre-market preferences, okay, that an individual make, or discrimination that individual have because of their treatment, that the family that we belong to, or in terms of certain decisions that we take, which are already taken. It's not something which labor market is doing, but we make a choice because we feel that is best for us. Okay, so they are talking about pre-market. Let me just see if one second. Okay. So, guys, I'm just reading the points which I've summed up. It says occupational choices which are influenced by the lower payoffs to given human capital characteristics. Then, occupational segregation reflects labor market discrimination. When you have the same profile in a human capital characteristics, but then you are offered a different working profile, then that is a labor market. If choices reflect different preferences, there are two choices. Okay, basically, when that does not reflect labor market discrimination, that is when I choose a job myself because I feel that is best suited, but that is a low paying job. But I cannot say that is a labor market discrimination. What sort is that? No particular problem because that I have made a choice, okay? Or it's a pre market discrimination because of our family background or the kind of, you can say, the choices that we make because of the people we engage with or what kind of understanding that we develop. It is because of that. So current labor market discrimination underestimates the problem of discrimination because of past or current pre-market discrimination. So one has to be basically what we have to be very careful that why when we are talking about that there is a wage differential between uh, female and white male, we have to look into that whether it's a part of the pre-market discrimination or past discrimination, or is it because of my labor market discrimination because of the prejudice involved because I belong to that particular uh, gender. Okay. So guys, having said that, now we look into that how do we measure this occupational segregation. So guys, before we move ahead, please let me know if there is any question.
Ma'am, can you explain when does occupational segregation become discrimination? Like, what's the...
So, Arushi, occupational segregation becomes, or it is a part of labor market discrimination when you have the same human capital characteristics. That is, you have the same level of productivity, you have the same level of education. So, like there are two people competing, one is male and one is female. So, your job, you have same level of education, you have got n number of trainings in your life, you have same number of experience for working for a particular job profile. But even then, despite having identical human capital characteristics, you go out and seek a job in a particular company. Let's say any XYZ company. You both are asking now because you belong to a specific gender. That company gives you a profile which pays you a low salary, okay, or a profile which is below to a profile that a male would be receiving. So, if that is a case, when despite having the same human capital characteristics, you are offered a job profile which gives a low salary, that marks a labor market discrimination. Am I clear?
Yes.
So, guys, that you have to understand. What is wage discrimination? When you both are hired, okay, so suppose you both are hired for the same profile, same job profile, but you are offered maybe let's say 1 lakh salary, the other one is offered 1 lakh 50,000 salary. So if that is a difference, even despite being on the same job profile, you are given a different salary, that becomes a wage discrimination. Okay, it's a labor market discrimination but is referred as wage discrimination. Okay, I hope this is clear to everyone, this motard differentiation between this wage and occupation. Guys, is it clear?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. So, guys, then we move ahead. So, guys, how do we measure occupational segregation? So, guys, occupational segregation is actually measured by a index of dissimilarity. Okay. So, we create an index. So, there will be like if they have created here. No. So, guys, basically, you would given the number of male in a particular job. So there will be different job profiles, number of women, number of men in there. Okay. And then we create an index of dissimilarity. So guys, what happens if your index of dissimilarity, if I get the index value as 100, that means the entire that job is fully segregated. So there will be segregation happening at every level or at every job that we are talking about. But if your index of dissimilarity is 0, That means there is no segregation of occupation because of the gender. Okay, so of course they have not shown how to do it. That is a part of appendix or a numerical question that I will do, so that will help you to understand. So basically what happens, one measure is to create an index of dissimilarity assuming worker of one gender remain in their job. This index indicates the percentage of other that would have to change the occupation for the two genders to have an equal occupation distribution. So we'll see how it happens. If all the occupations were completely segregated, okay, so basically segregation. So occupation meaning that a certain work profile only meant for men, a certain work profile only meant for female. Then, if that is the case, what would happen? Your index score would be 100. But if it is balanced, that is, equal number of proportion of men and women are involved in that occupation, that means there is no segregation happening. As a result, the index of dissimilarity will be zero. And what they are quoting, that over the years, when they are actually finding out this index of dissimilarity, there has been a considerable fall from 68 in 1970 to 59 in 1980, and finally to 53 in 1980. So there has been a reduction of index of dissimilarity. Okay, so guys, this is one way. So guys, this is way of calculating. Then guys, I'm skipping this part because this might not come in a sense, because generally a question is on a numerical, so we can skip this. You can read when you get the time, otherwise it's okay. Now guys, coming to the part wage discrimination, that was occupational discrimination. So guys, occupational discrimination is generally found through the index of dissimilarity. Now, how do we measure your wage discrimination? So it says measuring wage discrimination represents another analogous problems. Okay. So we pointed out early that the average earnings can differ between men and women because of either differences in the average level of productivity, or because in what women and men are paid possessing each characteristic. The latter source of difference is what we interpret as a current labor market discrimination. Ideally, wage discrimination could be identified and measured using the four-step process. So, guys, not exactly going into the details. So, guys, what we are doing, what we first we take the information about the human capital characteristics of the workers. Okay, so all the gender. So male, female, whoever is working, we are taking. So we are creating a study. So we have certain sample. So what we will do, from that sample, we will gather the information about the human capital information. So guys, you could see that what all information it will be: age, education, training, experience, work experience, tenure with the current employer, hours they dedicate to the work, so on and so forth. Then we do a regression analysis to figure it out how these factors, that is education, training, all these, impact my dependent variable, that is your earnings. So how would that get impacted? Once I find out, that is you can say that is my idle earnings that I should have been receiving because of my productivity. And then what we find out, that what are the actual earnings that that particular individual is receiving. Okay, so we subtract actual earnings received and the earnings based on the productivity that we have figured it out. So that difference would be a measure of your wage discrimination. Okay, so if you are not being paid because despite having the same potential, then that would be referred as your wage discrimination. Okay, so guys, these are the characteristics, or these are the four steps that they have elaborated. So I've just made the point so that you are able to understand. Guys, are you able to understand this point, how to calculate that?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so guys, then of course a lot of things they are quoting about certain literature studies which have it's a literature review that they are presenting, the studies which they have done. So they are quoting that, so I'm skipping this. Now guys, we come to the second type of difference, that is due to the race that we belong to. So
Ma'am, so are these studies important that they're quoting?
no, Ananya, you can, of course you can read it for a while, but the question generally doesn't come in which you have to code these studies, because they will be heavy on certain data, so you cannot memorize the data.
Ma'am, can they ask us to measure wage discrimination or other forms of discrimination?
So they will ask you. So as I told you, like index of dissimilarity is a way of figuring out
Mm-hmm.
occupation. So of course, if you will see your backend questions, one of the question is to construct the index of dissimilarity. That question generally comes in. There's an
Got it.
and you must have seen when I discussed the potential questions last yesterday. So you would see that there was a question on this. Okay, so they give you a table and then you have to construct that index. Okay. Okay, so guys, then we move ahead. We'll do those problems in terms of how to calculate those questions. Okay, so guys, we move ahead in terms of now. I didn't make those points. So guys, it says that the earnings of full-time workers, however, do not tell the whole story of the economic disparities. Okay, so guys, basically, in this earning differentials between black and white Americans, we are trying to find out the employment ratio, employment vis-a-vis unemployment ratios. So, what is this in terms of how many people who are seeking the job ultimately gets that job? So that is actually determining the, you can say, or explaining the severity of problem with respect to the black people. Okay, so guys, it is interesting to see that what they are saying that over the years black females are still progressing, that is they are still getting the job and they are getting well paid as well, but the situation with respect to the black males have been very very deteriorating. Okay, they are not able to increase their participation in the labor force, and also the kind of salaries that they receive is much much lower than the black females as well, and also with respect to the white males. Okay, now the question is why. Okay, so we are looking into first what are the ways in which we can find out that why there is a difference between their earnings, what are the sources through which we can look into. Second is that what are the potential reasons that why black males are not able to combat this discrimination, or what are the sources. Okay, so guys, it says the earnings of full-time workers however do not tell the story. There is no major difference in the fraction of adult male employees in the two groups who work part-time, and there is a lower percentage of black women than the white women who work part-time. There's a significant disparities however in the employment to population ratios. So guys, this you have to focus about rather than part-time, that how we are looking into this working profile of these blacks versus white. So there are significant disparities, however, in the employment to the population ratio. So what is employment to population ratio? The ratio of employed adults to the entire population of adults in the particular demographic group. Okay, so guys, ratio of employed adults divided by the entire population of that demographic group. So if a black, so entire population of blacks. Or if it is we are talking about black males only, only the population of black males or black females or entire. So it can be seen in the first two columns of the table 12.5 that as compared to the white population, a much lower percentage of black population is employed. The difference are particularly striking for males. That is what I said, that for the males, it is much more larger. We begin our analysis where they, one second, let me just complete it. The difference are particularly striking for males. We begin our analysis of black-white disparities by considering these differences in the employment ratio. Yes, Vedai, what you are saying?
How are the ratios created? Oh my,
How
sorry, how are they calculated?
How are we calculating? So, the ratio is simply the ratio of employed adults. So, you would have the number of people who are employed, okay, in that particular what we are talking about. So, there's a population employment number of people, absolute number, and then divided by, so let's say just for an example that we are talking about black population. Okay, so number of people in the black who are employed at the moment, okay, divided by the total labor force participation, that is the total population of blacks in that region. So number of people employed divided by the total population becomes your ratio. I hope I'm clear about it. Simply, it's a simple employment ratio that we calculate.
Yes, ma'am, got it. Thank you.
Okay, it's a simple labor force participation rate. They are just writing in a different term. Okay, so guys, let's see how they are actually looking into basically total labor force minus the employment. That could also be an unemployment rate. So guys, difference in the employment ratio. So guys, before that, just have a look at this table 12.5 which they are quoting. So guys, you can see it's an employment ratio, labor force participation rate, unemployment rate. Okay, so guys, we can either, so how they are basically calculating, guys, are, it's basically they are looking into the employment ratio. That is the area which I'm interested in. So how they are calculating labor force participation rate, these are given, so don't think about how we are calculating, but it is simply a ratio that we generally calculate for any employment ratio. So labor force participation rate minus the unemployment rate is equal to your employment ratio. Guys, please understand, labor force participation rate minus the unemployment rate would give you the employment ratio. Okay, so guys, you can see that of course the differences have been narrowing, or what you say in terms of the whites, but the major improvement that has happened is with respect to the black women. They are improving a lot, but black males are still not improving. Of course, there is a much cultural reasons behind that. So guys, it says that the employment ratio for a given demographic group is completely determined by the percentage of groups seeking employment. That is very important, the number of people who are seeking employment, labor force participation. Of course, how many will get, that's a different thing. And the percentage of those seeking employment who find it. Okay, ultimately, this is the employment rate. Because the latter is equal to 100, because labor force participation would have employed plus unemployed. So that's why the 100%. Because the latter has the 100% minus the group's unemployment rate, okay, this unemployment rate, the employment ratio can be expressed as the function of two widely published data, that is the group labor force participation rate and its unemployment rate. Okay, so that is what I have told you, that unemployment rate or ratio is being figure it out, or how they are uh, finding it out. Labor force participation rate total, that is the number of people who are want to get a job and who didn't get the job, that is the labor force participation rate, minus the people who are unemployed, those who want to get the job but they are not getting for some reason or the other. Once we minus that, we get that employment ratio. Okay, so now what they are saying, that why there is a so guys, this is the way. So employment ratios are the way which through which we are understanding the severity of the discrimination or the problem, that why there's a discrimination in the salaries of your white and blacks. Okay, now the question is why. So we understood that women are improving, their salaries are improving, their participation rate is improving, but why black males are not able to? Okay, so the reason is that, so guys, it says that looking first at the labor force participation, we see that the black women had a higher labor force participation than the white women. So they are performing even better than the white women over the period 1970 to 1997. Among men, however, the picture is much different. Black men have consistently lower participation rate than the white men, and while both groups of men experienced reduction in the labor force participation, the reduction was much greater for the blacks. Why? The declining. So, guys, one of the reasons which they are quoting, before I just tell you, it is about in terms of that the blacks tend to drop out very fast from their schooling, particularly from the post secondary. And then one of the other reason is that the kind of quality they get in the school is much deplorable. So as a result, because there is no quality, they tend to drop out. So of course, if you don't have those human capital characteristics, then that is sure that you would be segregated on the basis of occupation that you are provided. It's not just to say that because you belong to a race, but there are certain characteristics which gives you less human capital characteristics. So, guys, it says the declining labor force participation of men are not just the result of earlier labor force withdrawal among the older men or most past secondary schooling, but the participation rate even of the men have dropped for both blacks and white, with these reduction confined with the high school education or less. Okay, so it has fallen in recent years, and many of these men apparently have been discouraged and dropped out of the labor force. it appears that at least some of the larger decline in the labor force participation are a consequences of their lower average levels of education, okay, because they are not able to compete because they don't have that, you can say, that level of education to compete with others. So as a result, one of the potential reason for why their you can say the employment ratio is not that high because of this lower average level of education. So guys, it says that table 12.5 also suggests that a higher unemployment rates of blacks are a cause of their lower employment to population ratio. Before 1980, the unemployment rate of black men and women were 1.6 to 1.9 times higher than those of white. Since 1980s, among blacks have been over twice. Okay, so this rate has been unemployment rate has been rising. It says that the unemployment rate of blacks have remained double that of comparable white. It would be erroneous to conclude from this, you can say, constancy, however, that recessions have equal proportionate effect on the black and white employment. So different times when the recessions were being faced by the American economy, they had an equal impact on both. But in fact, the constant ratio means that black workers suffer disproportionately in recessions. Okay, so during recession, whenever there will be layoff, the larger brunt has to be faced by your blacks rather than the males. So there's two reasons which they are quoting. One is the consequence of the lower average level of education and the persistent recessions that have been happening. The impact of recession is largely on the black workers than on your male counterparts. Okay. So guys, again they are talking about the unemployment ratio. So guys, you can see this is particularly among the black males they are talking about, that this ratio has been rising, the level of unemployment. So it was 0.032, now it is 0.07. Okay, so guys, employment rate falls from 95 to 92, which implies that over 3% of whites who had lost the job, which is 3 divided by 95 is equal to 0.02, whereas in compared to the black, they lost 90 to 84, so the gap is of 7, and employed black lost their job 6 by 90. Okay, so that is the gap which they are finding out. Of course, it has to be 7 because they are quoting 7. So 7 divided by 90, so whatever the value will be. Okay, so that would be the ratio they are talking about. So you can see it is only 0.032 for the whites, but for the blacks, it is 0.067, which is almost the double. So that is the impact that they have, particularly due to recession. So guys, moving further, in terms of the another thing that I have told you, it is about the quality of schooling. So why they are talking about that, the why black employment is not largely, they are dropping out from the labor market, even when they join any kind of a profession, it is because of their certain schooling experience which adds up to their productive characteristics. Okay, so the quality of schooling has been a very very important factor for particularly blacks to really not get a particular decent job or to dropping out for the job which they have got. Okay, now guys, as I told you that whether it is a uh, gender, whether it's a race, whether it's an ethnicity, there would be a segregation or discrimination with respect to your occupational and wage discrimination. So, guys, but the fact is, what they are saying, that in terms of occupational discrimination or wage discrimination, particularly with respect to the race, that is, with respect to the color, you won't find much of an occupational discrimination or segregation. Okay, but wage discrimination could be a larger. So guys, it says occupational segregation appears to be less prevalent by race than by the gender. Okay, in the gender, occupational segregation would be much, but with respect to the race, it might not be much. Okay, so guys, it says that the recent studies that calculated incidence of dissimilarity by both race and gender found that the incidence comparing black and white occupational distribution had values roughly half of the size of the index. That is, they are fairly distributed. So black and your whites are fairly distributed in different occupation because the number is zero point 0.5, not larger. You can say occupational segregation is there. While the racial occupational discrimination are smaller and have fallen faster over the time than the gender related ones. Okay, gender related occupational segregation is still largely prevalent. Economists continue to study what role, if any, discrimination plays in generating occupational discrimination by race. They are still exploring, but the wage discrimination has been one of the prominent. So, guys, it says the issue of wage discrimination, researchers have attempted to again identify that why there is a wage discrimination. Okay, so that means even if I am productive or something, then why I'm being paid less. So, guys, it says that what factors are most responsible for the large wage gap that exists between blacks and white. So it says analysis that use conventional data on education, experience, hours of work, everything. So guys, you remember that wage discrimination is basically using that four-step method. So I've tried to figure it out the level of productivity and how my productivity impacts my earnings. So I would get the actual level of earnings that one deserves because of the level of productivity that he has. Okay, and then I figure it out that what are the actual earnings received by that person, and if there is a larger gap, that means there is a wage based discrimination. So guys, after looking into these, but clearly not all observed earnings between, one study for example have estimated that measured productive characteristics including occupation as white men, they would receive 89% of those received by whites. Okay, only 89%. As in case of the gender based earning differential, one is left with the question whether the remaining 11% differential reflects the current wage discrimination or unmeasured productive characteristics. Okay, so 89% could be said because of the productive characteristics reasons. But what about the 11% or the difference that we are not able to account for? Whether they are because of current wage discrimination or because of the unmeasured productive characteristics. Okay, so guys, but what are the unmeasured productive characteristics? So if there's a difference of that is 11% which we are not able to understand, what are those unreported productive characteristics? Why there is a difference between the salaries of white and blacks? So guys, what they have figured it out, I told you about a qualification test or the test that they have done. So there was an armed force qualification test which they have figured it out that black Americans have very have lower AFQT test, that is American Force Qualification Test, on an average, which is primarily associated with the poor quality schooling and influence of the poverty on home and neighborhood characteristics. Studies that are able to include AFQT scores among the measures of productive characteristics have been limited to young people, but they generally estimate the difference in cognitive achievement alone explain the most of the overall wage earnings gap. Okay, so guys, this is a very important difference that they are talking about, the level of cognitive achievement that they achieved in a particular test. That has to go that is the one of the major factor which could actually explain the difference between the wage earnings. Okay, so guys, this they are explaining further in these two paragraphs, so I'm just skipping the part and moving towards the earning differences by ethnicity. But before that, guys, please have a pause, go through it, and let me know if there are any questions about it.